Spurs are set to appoint Thomas Frank as Ange Postecoglou's successor after agreeing to pay his £10 million release clause to get him out of his Brentford contract. And yes, this is a West Ham fan discussing Spurs. Welcome to Tartan YouTube channel. If you're new around here, please do subscribe. We're getting close to 4,000 subscribers, and that would be a nice milestone to hit. Admittedly, it's nice for me. It won't mean anything to any of you, but still, don't let that put you off. Nevertheless, subscribe, and also do drop a like on the video as well by clicking the thumbs up button. Helps out the video, helps out the channel. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Two topics to discuss today. The sacking of Ange Postecoglou and the appointment of Thomas Frank, and I'd like to begin with Ange, if you don't mind. Many years ago, a wise man once said to me, Gio, what's right isn't always what's best. Now, admittedly, that was in relation to one of our team members handing in a holiday request form out with the allocated period to hand in holiday request form. They wanted a few days off. A little bit less serious. But I think that logic applies to this. What was the right thing to do? What did Ange Postecoglou deserve? And what was the best thing for Spurs? It may have been two different answers, and Daniel Levy either couldn't win or couldn't lose, depending on which side of the fence you sit on, with Levy and with Postecoglou. I think Postecoglou deserved next season. I think he deserved another crack, because he won that European trophy. He won a trophy at Spurs, something that managers with a better footballing CV than him failed to do, like Mourinho and Conte, the first manager to win a trophy since Ramos, nearly 20 years ago. So I think he deserved that crack. But what was best for Spurs, it's hard to ignore the Premier League campaign. They didn't. Their whole statement was about the Premier League campaign, about how they finished 17th, and yes, there was injuries, but it still wasn't good enough. But both things are true. Fantastic. They won a trophy. They won a European trophy. That is fantastic. In the Premier League, terrible. And I know, and I will add the context here, I know once the knockout stages got underway in the Europa League and Spurs were quite obviously not getting relegated, which, being honest, was across the whole season. They were never in danger of being relegated. They were never in a relegation battle. But once they knew they were fine, they started to focus on the Europa League, and rightly so, and it was justified. They won the competition. So I think it's fair to say they maybe dropped a few more points than they would have done had they focused on the Premier League. But they may have crept up a few places, but I don't think they would have went from 17th to 7th. They might have went from 17th to 13th at best or something like that. The Premier League campaign was horrendous. They were almost a laughing stock some weekends. It was almost fun to watch Spurs because you knew they were going to get beat. Both things can be true, and I think both things are true. Europa League, fantastic. Premier League, terrible. So what do you do? And obviously Spurs have decided that, well, we can't have that Premier League campaign next season, so we're going to get rid of him. But here's the thing that's hard to sort of accept and get my head round. Had Ange Postecoglou finished 5th and won no trophies, so let's just say they got knocked out of Europa League in the last 16, out they went. But yet they finished 5th, qualifying for Champions League football next season. I think he would have kept his job. I feel quite confident Postecoglou would be there next season. So winning a trophy and getting Champions League football, sacked. Finishing 5th, no trophy, Champions League football, you keep your job. And that's the bit that's almost like hard to get my head round to some extent. Prioritising this over that. Ultimately, next season, it's the same outcome. But I think he's leaving Thomas Frank a club in a good position. And I know that might go against the grain and might be unpopular. I don't care. It's my opinion. Champions League football next season. They've just won a trophy. And one thing that's very telling is the amount of Tottenham players that have come out. I've seen a Spurs account tweet a list of all the players that have said something to or about Postecoglou on social media. It's a lot. It would have been quicker to list the players that didn't say anything. Some of those players that would have been listed won't have social media or never post on social media. That, of course, there's going to be some players that are glad to see him go. It always happens. There's players that won't be happy with a lack of minutes, etc., etc. But the amount of players that have come out in support of Postecoglou was huge. That doesn't happen very often, but what that tells you is he never once lost that dressing room. You could see it. You could see it in against Bodo Glimt, out the second leg, semi-final away, when they won, and they were very together with Postecoglou, the players, after that match. I don't think he ever... And you see clips the club put out in the change room and stuff, and it was obvious in there, but that's, club media. You have to take it with a pinch of salt to some extent. But I think all the players coming out and thanking him, they don't have to do that. You don't need to. But it's not just, oh, thanks for everything, Gaffer. They're posting essays. They're declaring their love for this guy. That is significant, in my opinion, because they were terrible last season, but the whole time, that changing room were behind him. That's huge. Postecoglou won't have any problems getting another job after this Spurs one. He won't have any problems whatsoever. And I will apply the context here. Context number one, I've already done it with the Europa League. Number two is the injuries. Now, the other manager from North London, as I said in previous videos, I think he's gaslighting when he talks about injuries to Arsenal, about how he's had the most injuries in the league. No, you haven't. People can fact check these things. You can express an opinion, which has all been hard done by. I feel like we must be one of the most impacted by injuries. Yes, you're right. You're fourth, I think. But Brighton were top. Second was Spurs. About 200, basically days lost in the Premier League due to injuries. Spurs were second, 250 days more than Arsenal. And like I said, in regards, that's one way of looking at it, but you've got to apply context to that. Arsenal were missing Tomiyasu for the entire season, so he basically hoovers up 20% of those days himself. Spurs, throughout the season, were missing Romero, Van de Ven, Udogie, they're important players. Under Postecoglou, when he played a back four of Pardo, Romero, Van de Ven, Udogie, by far the first choice back four. They played 21 games and won 16. Lost twice, I think. That's an incredible record. So, I appreciate this is, if my auntie had bollocks, she'd be my uncle and all that, but had Postecoglou had his first choice defence for the entire season, if you were to take that and divide it by the games played and multiply it by 38, they'd be in the Champions League spots. But that's not how football works. And I guess that was the downfall of Postecoglou in the end. Stubborn. When he wouldn't change his tactics to accommodate the players up until, ironically, the final in Bilbao, he went more defensive. He said, basically, I've got my first choice defence. I can trust them to defend. I can trust them to keep Man United out. Plus, Man, you aren't very good. Two stubborn managers went head-to-head. Postecoglou changed his tactics a little bit. They won the Europa League because of it. I think Postecoglou's reign at Spurs has been a success, because when he went to Tottenham, what was the job spec? Get Champions League football, win a trophy. That was it. He's achieved it both second season. First season got into Europa League. Second season won the trophy, got Champions League football. That is removing the whole 17th in the league thing. But who cares? In 10 years' time, Spurs fans won't care, and they shouldn't care. They'll look back and go, yeah, but I remember winning that Europa League in Bilbao. Postecoglou gave them a memory for life. But I understand why Levy's decided to sack him, because that league campaign was horrendous. Spurs were terrible. And I don't think he was getting the best out of their best players. And the appointment of Thomas Frank, I think... I do that face because it's annoying. As a West Ham fan, it's frustrating. I think it's a really good appointment. I think it's safe. I think in the past they've taken gambles. I think, Mourinho was a gamble, Conte was a gamble. I think Postecoglou wasn't. I felt Postecoglou was safe, but then I was a big Postecoglou fan prior to him going to Spurs. And I had that face when he went to Spurs. There's a manager I'd love at West Ham going to Tottenham, and he might make them successful. I'm going to argue I was correct. They won a trophy. Thomas Frank... The interesting thing would be, I've always felt at Brentford, his attitude towards cups wasn't great. I always felt Thomas Frank was happy to get knocked out of the cup competitions and focus on the league. Now, you could say, well, that's because it's Brentford, they could get relegated, etc. But there has been some times where actually they've not been in danger of relegation. Like this season, they weren't in danger of relegation. And I feel like he could make more of a go at it in the cup competitions. And that's something he's going to have to do at Spurs, because he's following a manager that's won a trophy. Postecoglou's put a little bit of pressure on Thomas Frank. And that's why I think he's left Tottenham in a good place for him to. That squad are together. And Thomas Frank is a really likeable guy, but you see the clips and stuff of him as well. Well, the Brentford players love him. I don't think that Tottenham aren't hiring a disruptive manager that's going to go in there and start kicking players out and start ripping up everything. And he'll go in and do things his way, but I think he'll do it gently and slowly, and he's not going to disrupt the apple cart, so to speak. There's a togetherness in that Spurs squad. I think Thomas Frank will benefit from that, but I think he will also utilise that to make Tottenham good this season. I think Tottenham will have a good season under him. It's like I said, it's just about how he prioritises the cup. Now, I would assume he will prioritise European football, although I think he might dismiss the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup a little bit. I don't think he'll do that with the Champions League. He won't be allowed to. That will be his job spec from Daniel Levy, you would imagine. Get us back into Champions League and compete in the Champions League. But they've had a bit of success now, those players. It'll be interesting how if their mentality changes, which is, well, we can win trophies at Spurs. We've just seen that. As for Thomas Frank going there, it'll be interesting if he takes Mboma with him. I think Man United might really be kicking themselves playing hardball with Brentford in the last couple of weeks, putting in offers below valuation, because if Thomas Frank wants Mboma, you'd imagine Levy will go get him. And if he has to pay 60 million, he'll have to pay 60 million. The wages, apparently the big lure to Old Trafford for Mboma was wages. Spurs will be able to match him. Spurs will be able to pay what Man U are paying if they want to. That would be interesting. I've seen Collins being linked as well. I'm not against that. I think, at the minute, they've got their centre-backs are injury prone. Whether that continues or whether that changes because of the way Postecoglou plays with such high intensity all the time, it takes its toll on the squad. There's a reason Spurs are quite high up in that injury list, and it will partly be down to how Spurs play under Postecoglou. So maybe they'll get a bit lesser, but a centre-back doesn't feel like a stupid position for Thomas Frank to try and address. The other player I'm surprised I'm not seeing linked to go with him is Damsgaard. I think he was excellent for Brentford, and I think Spurs have been lacking that at times. That's Maddison's job, that's Maddison's role, but sometimes he's been underwhelming, he's been injured. Kulusevski as well, but I think some of his better games come out on the right-hand side, but I appreciate I've just spoke about Brian Mboma. I think a mini clear-out needs to happen at Spurs. I think there's a lot of players that just haven't quite lived up to it and need to be moved on. But I think Frank will bring calmness and stability to Spurs. This feels like the first manager they've appointed that you could almost see him being there in 3-4 years' time. And it's been a long time since I felt like that with Spurs appointing managers. Like the Mourinho one is a prime example. It felt, when they hired him, it felt incredibly short term. Like, come in, win us something and leave, please. Came in, left quickly and didn't win anything. I don't get that with Frank. It feels more long-term planning. And I think he will make them a very good team next season. I think they'll be very hard to beat. I think they'll be very efficient. They may not be as exciting as prime Ange ball, but they're also not going to be as... I was going to use the word stupid. That's harsh. Naive, open as Ange ball at its worst. I think they'll be a very good team. I think this is a very, very good appointment by Spurs. It feels destined to be a success. But the problem is, what is a success at Spurs now? Because before, you'd imagine winning a trophy was success. Well, Postecoglou's just shown you that it's not. You need more than that. So what does Thomas Frank have to achieve? Well, it's getting back into European football through the league and competing for trophies, possibly winning a trophy. To be a success, he's going to have to win a trophy. He's not going to do that in his first season, I don't think. But that's why I think there's maybe a little bit time on his side in regards to this appointment. I think this is... To justify sacking Ange Postecoglou, they had to get the appointment right. If they went and got this appointment wrong, they went and hired a manager that wasn't sufficient, and in 12 months' time they're sacking him. You would look back to this summer and go, well, what did you sack Ange Postecoglou for? For this. The next appointment had to be good. It had to be strong to justify the sacking. Now, this is without the benefit of hindsight. This is pure prediction stuff now, because I don't know. Frank could turn out to be a nightmare at Spurs. It doesn't feel like that. This feels like a good appointment. This feels like he's almost already justified sacking Postecoglou. But now Frank's got to go and finish that justification off. And it's It's a tough job. Honestly, he's leaving. I think Postecoglou's leaving Spurs in a decent place for Frank, but he's also left him in a bit of a difficult position, which is, well, I've won a trophy. Can you? And if you finish 5th or 6th and you get Europa League the following season, is that enough? I think it would be. But I think Postecoglou would be well within his rights to say, well, I won a trophy and got Champions League football and I got sacked. He's got Europa League football. Be interesting one. Spurs will be a club to watch next season. I wouldn't rule them out of finishing. I don't think they'll win the league or anything, but to get them back up into the European spots via the league, I think that's very, very possible. Thomas Frank is an excellent tactician. He's an excellent man-manager. And I think maybe that's what, after a season of chaos and stubborn tactics, maybe that's what they need. Because at one point, it looked like Postecoglou had lost the fan base. Stamford Bridge. That was a night I thought, he's done. He can't come back from this. He's clapping the away fans. And I know he played it down and stuff. I don't believe him. It felt like he was done. And I thought he lost the fan base that night. And I thought he won some of them back in Bilbao. But he never, ever lost that changing room. And that's somewhat quite impressive. Disappointment, annoyingly, is somewhat quite impressive as well. And I think this is a good move for Thomas Frank, I should add, because he didn't get the Liverpool job. The Man U job came up, he didn't get that one either. The Chelsea job came up, he didn't get that one. The Arsenal one ain't coming up anytime soon. Newcastle one's probably not coming up anytime soon. Villa one's probably not coming up anytime soon. So it was sort of, the Spurs job was the only job. If he wanted to move up to what you can consider a European side in the Premier League, it was only really, the City job's not coming up. It was only really the Spurs job for him now. So I think this is a good move for Tottenham and a good move for Thomas Frank. Annoyingly.